the interesting thing that struck me this week is that my guess is that there's a big difference between the way that you see the world and the way that your parents see the world. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. I mean, one's just age, is that the way that a 40, 50-year-old sees the world is going to be different than the way that a 12, 13, 14-year-old sees the world. But there's also a generation gap. You guys are known as Generation Z, whereas your parents are probably either Gen X or millennials. And then the other one's just cultural perspective, just kind of like the world that you're revolving around. And I think you guys, I mean, especially you 8th graders, have probably figured out that the hip phrase, is it done? I really hope it's done. But okay, boomer has become a hip phrase. Although ironically, I mean, I don't know if any of your guys' parents are actually baby boomers. So saying okay, boomer to either your parents or to your teachers, unless they're over the age of 55, they're not boomers. But nonetheless, we say boomer, like, okay, boomer, like that's, I always thought it was kind of dumb. I still do, but it's really cool now, I guess. But I was researching, I was really looking for jokes, you know, like if you guys heard Jeff Foxworthy's You Might Be a Redneck If. So I was looking for You Might Be a Boomer If. And I'm sure there's lots of those, but that's not really the way they do okay, boomer memes. So instead I just found 10. They're not necessarily funny. They're just kind of reality of the difference. What if you're a boomer, you probably fit in most of these 10 category or 10 things. So like number 1 was you actually know why they call it dialing a phone. There was a rotary dial on a phone if you're a boomer. Number 2 was you had a black and white TV with 3 channels and you had to turn it on to let it warm up because they had tubes inside. Number 3 was you really wanted to sit in the peanut gallery of Howdy Doody. Number 4 was you actually know how many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop, and you know why that's funny. Number 4, well, I said so that was number 4. Number 5 was you bought Cracker Jacks for 10 cents and actually got a good prize inside. Number 6 was you carried a metal lunchbox to school. Number 7 was your mom dressed you in your pajamas to go to the drive-in. Number 8 was your mom warmed up leftovers in the oven instead of in the microwave. Number 9, I guess this is a little bit older, you used an actual iron to straighten your hair. And number 10 was that your mom quoted Dr. Spock. Not Mr. Spock from Star Trek, but Dr. Spock. And again, if you know who that is, then you're probably a boomer. And the reason that I wanted to start with that is that, again, this season I think is probably very different for you guys versus your parents. I mean, again, not only the way that you see the world, but I think right now we're experiencing different realities. You know, is that I think us versus our parents have different fears, different concerns, different realities. So what I thought we'd start off today is like, let's talk about where they're at, where I think your parents would be at, versus where you guys are probably at. And the first one is that thinking about parents is that obviously your parents have different experiences right now. The experience of these last couple of weeks is very different for your parents than it is for you. I mean, some of your parents are still going into work. They're still driving in. They're going on freeways that are mostly empty. They're in offices that are mostly empty. Some of them are working from home right now. Some of them are not working at all. Some of your parents are nurses or doctors that are dealing with, you know, situations that they haven't normally dealt with, in scales that they haven't normally scaled with. And the reality is that while for a lot of us, our biggest concerns are maybe that we're annoyed by things or that we're bored, they're probably dealing with more, they're worried or concerned or scared of certain things. And the biggest ones that I was thinking about, like if for me too, but putting myself in your parents' shoes, is that my guess is their biggest fear right now is, or their biggest concern is a loss of security. Is that right now, the reality is some of us, some of our parents are worried right now that they might lose their job. That their job, I mean, if you guys heard Kyle's message this morning, or if you get a chance to hear it after this, he was talking about his friend that works for a theater, and the theater just said like, hey, you don't have a job anymore. I mean, maybe when we reopen, you will have a job, but that might not be till July. So he has no job. And some of your parents might be in a similar, some of your parents who are teachers, like, are teachers getting paid? I mean, if summer vacation has already started, that's all well and good for us, but for a teacher, they don't get paid over summer. So that's a little bit concerning for some of them. So same thing, like not only your job, but your money and your income. Like, where is that money going to be come from? Do you work for a job that will pay you even if you're not working, even if you can't work? If you have a job that you can't do online, yeah, that's concerning. Same thing, like, obviously if they sell something, if they're in retail or anything like that. And then the other one is health. Is that I think that's a big concern for that and it should be, especially for the 55 and older, but for all of us really. And maybe if we're younger, we don't really think about our own health, but I guarantee you your parents are. My parents are. And I mean, just think about kind of your parents' practical concerns, right? I mean, they're worried about paying bills, paying rent, saving for college, saving for retirement. Just money in general is a concern of theirs. And I mean, I don't know if it's a concern of yours, but it's definitely a concern of theirs. Same thing with shopping. I don't know how many of you guys have gone shopping. I know I went shopping this week, and it's a little intimidating. I mean, I went shopping a couple of weeks ago, and there were lines like crazy. Like, I took a photo, I don't know if you guys saw on my Instagram, I took a photo of driving by Costco, and there was a line of carts going all the way around the building 2 hours before it opened. So it was crazy. And going now, there's less lines, but everybody's wearing masks. Some people are wearing gloves. Everyone's trying to like avoid each other. It's a very different reality than us that just kind of get to sit in our homes. And then another concern, obviously, for our families is like, our parents are very much thinking about, how do I care, raise, and support you guys? Like for some of you guys that are homeschooled, I mean, your parents have been teaching for some time right now. But for those of you guys that haven't been homeschooled, that's a very different thing. Like, your parents haven't had to do this. And maybe right now they're kind of like, I don't know what to do. I hope they're doing their homework. I hope they're doing whatever. Like, maybe they're like, gosh, I got to figure out how to do this stuff. Like, it's a challenge. It's a concern. Am I doing what's right for my kids right now? And then the other one too is that I mean, don't get me wrong, like, that's one thing about this time, is that there's a myth out there that if you are under the age of 60, you're safe. And that is very not true. There are plenty of people getting sick. In fact, there are more people getting sick under the age of 60. And there are plenty of people that are not doing well because of that. But those, like your parents, are very much aware of that. And they have family and friends. If that's where our parents are at, like, where are we at? Where are you guys at? Because don't get me wrong, we're probably in somewhat different positions. You know, what you guys are worried about is probably different than what I'm worried about. But my guess is that for a lot of us, many of us are much less worried and probably more annoyed, more bored. And if we're really honest, I think a lot of us would say that this is an older people issue that is now affecting me in my life. And I'm a little resentful of that. And I'm bored. Or maybe I don't even get it. Maybe I'm just like, seriously, like, you took down the basketball hoops? Like, get over yourselves. Like, come on, this is overblown. This is no big deal. And like we talked about last week, I have a hunch, if we were willing to admit it, like, a lot of us are maybe feeling lonely. And like we talked about last week, I think the challenge is, if you're lonely when you're going to school, it's a fairly easy fix for that. You can literally just turn to the person next to you and try and start a conversation. It's not always easy, don't get me wrong, but it's a lot harder now, where now I gotta pick up a phone, or I gotta like email, or whatever. You guys probably don't email, but you know what I have to actually reach out to somebody if I'm feeling lonely. So that's tough. We're struggling with that. And I think another one is that we have less freedom to do whatever we want. Like, if this was summer vacation, then we'd be able to go outside, we'd be able to go to movies and to go to parks and go to our friends' houses and do, sports or whatever. We don't have that freedom right now. Some of us are trying to do that and figuring out ways to do that. But the reality is, like, There's much less freedom right now. So the challenge is both us and our parents are dealing with loss. And either that's through experiencing the actual loss, whether it's physical loss, whether it's emotional, whether it's whatever it is, or it's the anticipation of loss. I might lose something sometime. Like that's just where we're at. That's what we're dealing with right now. So what I wanted us to talk about today is if we crack open our Bibles, in the Bible, there's no human that understands loss better than Job. We've talked about Job, hopefully a little bit in the past. But if you guys have your Bibles, if you want to flip to the book of Job, it's kind of about, what is this, about a third of the way, a little bit more. If you open the Bible halfway through and you get to Psalms, you're one book too far. Just move one book back and you get to Job. Now, a little bit about Job. Job's kind of an interesting book. It's actually called a wisdom book because it's not really history. And we're not exactly sure when Job lived. But what Job, the story of Job, the book of Job is about is that there's this guy Job and God says like, hey, this guy's got it like figured out. This guy is living faithfully, is honoring me, is sacrificing to me. It's awesome. And then Satan shows up and Satan comes up to God and says, hey, this guy Job is a phony. This guy Job only likes you because of what you give him. He doesn't actually like you for you. He just likes all the stuff that you've given him. So God disagrees. And God says like, no, I think you're wrong. In fact, you know what? Go ahead, take everything away from Job, and I guarantee you, he's still going to follow me. And so that's exactly what Satan does. Satan takes away everything. I mean, literally, like it's insane. If you read the second part of Job chapter 1, is that what is it? In one moment, in one day, like this servant comes up and goes like, oh, Job, like there was this horrible storm and all of your servants are dead. And then another guy shows up and he goes like, oh, same thing. All of your cattle are dead. And then this other guy shows up and goes, oh, all of your children are dead. Like it's insane what happens to this guy. And so then at the end of chapter 1, and this is what's amazing about Job, is at the end of chapter 1, verse 20. So he just heard all of this. And then Job, it says in verse 20, then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. Like, that's crazy. I mean, literally everything that can go wrong goes wrong. Job loses everything and still says, you know, God be praised. I've told you guys this story a couple of times that there was one of the most powerful moments for me as a new Christian is I went to a memorial service for one of my first students' moms who passed away from cancer. And at that memorial service, I'd never been to a Christian memorial service before. Again, I'd only been a believer for about a year. And at that memorial service, they started off with worship songs. And the second worship song I remember they did, the first one they did was How Great Is Our God, which was amazing. And then the second one they did was Blessed Be Your Name. And if you guys remember how the bridge of Blessed Be Your Name goes, it says, you give and take away, you give and take away. And my heart will choose to say, blessed be your name. And as they were singing that, the widow, her husband, the widow stands up in the front row with his arms raised, singing that. And for me as a new Christian, I was like, wow, like that's what it looks like to follow God. Like, how can you lose something and still say, and yet I choose to say, blessed be your name? That's where Job is at. And it's an amazing testimony, I think. Sadly, that's only chapter 1, not the end of the story. So Job doesn't curse God, but he curses, or well, actually, he doesn't curse God. So then Satan says, well, the only reason that he's still with you is because he still has his health. If you made him sick, if I made him sick, then that's a whole different story. So God goes, you're wrong. Like, go ahead. So Satan does. Satan makes, and it even says in chapter 2, it even says that, what is it? Struck Job with loathsome sores from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. So which in Jewish understanding is pretty much the worst thing that can happen. Every inch of your body is covered with painful sores. Is the situation that he's in. Every inch of his body hurts. And it even says this weird, he took a piece of broken pottery to scrape himself while sitting in the ashes. Like, that's pretty much the worst situation a Jew can picture. So finally he gets to this point, and this is the low point where Job, he doesn't actually curse God, but he starts cursing himself. Like, woe is me, why was I born? I have every right to complain. My life has no hope. No one's listening to me. He starts going through all of these different chapters about his, like, woe is me. So then his friends show up, and his friends try to tell him that it's actually his fault, because the way that the Jews would understand punishment or things going wrong is if you do something good, God does stuff good for you. And if you do bad things, then God punishes you, which is not true, but that's how they understood it. So his friends keep telling him, oh, you must have done something wrong. He says, no, I didn't do anything wrong. And then, of course, the end of the story, which is pretty harsh, is that you get down to chapter 32, I think. Oh, no, he keeps going. Complaining. 38. So 38, 40, 38, 39, 40, and 41 are God's answer. So God basically shows up with one of the harshest things or the scariest things he's ever said. Who is this who darkens my counsel by words without knowledge? Dress for action like a man. I will question you, and you will make it known to me. Or another version I've seen this is, brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will answer me. If God says that to you, like, get ready. And then God goes for four chapters of basically saying, like, who the heck do you think you are? Like, remember, I'm God, you're not. Like, and it literally, like, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Where were you when I made the seas? Where were you? Like, are you going to tell me what to do? Which seems like a pretty harsh answer, but it's also a true answer. But leads us with that question of, okay, what do we do then with loss? Like, yes, now don't get me wrong, our perception of loss might be different, and it's certainly different if we're going to compare it to Job. To say, like, okay, my loss of not being able to hang out with my friends, my loss of being lonely, my loss of certain activities that we're going to do feels much less significant, especially now where we're going to, like, and I hope you guys know this, and if you don't, like, I don't want to be the one to break it to you, but apparently these next 2 weeks are going to be the harshest that this virus does, it sounds like. And that there's going to be a lot of news that's going to be pretty bad, it sounds like, over these next 2 weeks. And so our losses, hopefully, may pale in comparison. But that doesn't mean that they're insignificant. I don't think we can dismiss the losses that we're still going through. So, like, thinking about, like, lost time with friends, right? Is that, yes, we might be able to chat, we might be able to do stuff like that, but we're still losing time, like, being around them in school, in church, around the neighborhood, stuff like that. Events, we're still losing out on sports, dances. I mean, for you 8th graders, 8th grade graduation can be a big deal. And, like, that sucks that you're going to lose that. Loss of freedom. Again, you have to stay inside. You can't go to the park. You can't go to the movies. You can't go to the village. You can't do those things. That's loss. And then the reality too is that there's going to be a possible loss of life. I mean, hopefully not yours, hopefully not anyone you know, but there's going to be, like, that's already happened and that's going to happen. So loss is just going to be a reality of right now, but certainly of these next couple of weeks. So for me, what I thought is what we do with that. There's 3 things that I want to advise you guys that I think we should all take. How do we deal with this? And the first one is that you have to grieve. And that's grieving. I mean, it's not only is it okay to grieve, is it okay to feel bad? Is it okay to hurt? Not only is it okay, it's essential. Is that if you don't grieve, if you don't accept the fact that like this sucks that this happened to me, then you never are going to get over it. You're never going to deal with it. Like we can't feel guilty that we're grieving, especially when we hear about all these horrible other things. Like loss is loss. Is that it's okay to feel bad, and we should. Like this sucks. Own that. That's the place to start. But then the second one, which I thought was pretty awesome, is that for everything else that Job's friends did wrong, in Job chapter 2, there's something pretty cool, I think. Is it Job chapter 2, if you go down to verse 11, it says this. It says, now when Job's 3 friends, so this is right after everything bad had happened, and then he gets really sick and he gets the sores and stuff like that. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that had come upon him, they came each from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Sophar the Naamathite, and they made appointments to come and to show him sympathy and comfort him. Now, so the reason that it's important that it's the Temanite, the Shumanite, and the Naamathite, they came from a long ways away. They weren't living next door. And when they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him, and they raised their voices and wept, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads toward heaven. And they sat with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. Again, for everything else that their friends did wrong, trying to convince him that it was his fault, trying to all that sort of stuff like that, this is one thing that they did right. This is one thing that is really awesome, I think. No words, just support, just sitting with Job. And if you ask me, like sometimes, a lot of times, that's what we need. We don't need someone to tell me what to do. We don't need someone to say, hey, this is your fault. This is blah, 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 blah. This is what you do in this situation. Sometimes they just need to sit and say, hey, that sucks. And to just sit with us in that. So for each one of you guys, I hope you know who that person is for you that will do that. Like, if you don't, like, find that friend for you. Whoever that is, that you know you can say, hey, this is what's going on. And they'll just say like, dang, dude, that sucks. I'm here for you. And that's it. Not that they hang up the phone, but that they're actually there to be able to sit in that moment with you. I think that's really important. But I think the second thing that's also important is that I bet you there's a lot of people that you know who don't have somebody like that, or don't know that they have somebody like that. And maybe you could be that person for them. Maybe there's people out there that need someone to just say, hey, that sucks, but I'm with you. I think that's really important. And then the third part is the part that Job had to land at, is that knowing who we are and knowing who God is. Not that our fears and our concerns and our losses and all of that are meaningless compared to what God is doing and going through, but it does put it all into perspective. Because it's one thing if we live in this is our reality, and our reality is this world, and our reality is this loss, and that's it. If we live there, then we don't have hope. But if we live in the place where the certainty is that God has already defeated both sin and death, then we live in eternal hope. We know that he's got this. We know that he's got you. And I want you guys to know that's that rock that you can build everything else on. If everything else goes away, you know that God's got this. God has already won. It's not in doubt. He's got this, and he's got you. Would you pray with me? Jesus, thank you for this morning. Thank you for this time. Thank you for our family that's able to gather even electronically and just be able to sit in your presence and be ministered to by you. I pray for your hand of healing over those who are sick, and I pray for all of us that have already experienced loss or are going to experience loss. I pray that you would be there with us. I pray that we would know that you are, because I think we know that you are, but sometimes it's hard to feel your presence, hard to feel that sense of you're there, the comforter, the advocate. You're on our side, and you're with us. And I pray this week you would remind us that you've got this. You're in control, even when it seems like there's no hope. It seems like there is no control. Yeah, help us see that and be that this week, and even radiate that to others that need to hear. Thank you. We love you. In Jesus' name, in your name, we pray. Amen.